Welcome back, beauties. In today's story, a desperate text meant for an ex-lover lands in the hands of a dangerous Korean mafia boss. What starts as a wrong number becomes a twisted fate when he shows up at her door with a luxury car and a promise that changes everything. Will this mysterious stranger be her salvation or her destruction? If you love intense romance with a dangerous edge, you're in for a treat. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell because this story is about to get wild. Let's dive in. A text sent in desperation. A number dialed by mistake. When Amina's vulnerable confession reaches Kang Seo, a dangerous Korean underworld prince wrapped in designer suits and deadly secrets, her ordinary world explodes into chaos. He arrives at her doorstep with obsidian eyes, a blood-red rose, and an offer that should terrify her, but instead awakens something she thought had died months ago. Now she's trapped between running for her life and running toward a man who might be her salvation, or her complete undoing. The message sat on Amina's screen like a wound she couldn't close. I'm breaking apart tonight. Please come. Touch me until I remember what it feels like to be wanted. Hold me until the sun rises, and I can pretend I'm not this lonely. Her thumb had been shaking when she pressed send. She'd meant it for Daniel, the man who'd crushed her heart like glass 3 months earlier. But in her haze of tears and wine, her finger had slipped. The wrong name. The wrong number. The message was gone now, irreversible, taunting her from the delivered notification. 23 minutes later, someone knocked on her door. Sharp. Deliberate. Commanding. Amina's heart stopped mid-beat. Ice flooded her veins. She forced herself to the door, every step heavier than the last, her mind screaming at her to stop. When she pulled it open, the man standing there stole the air from her lungs. Korean. Devastatingly handsome. Ink crept up from beneath his collar, dark patterns that disappeared into the expensive fabric of his charcoal suit. His frame filled her doorway like he'd been carved from shadows and stone. Black eyes studied her with an intensity that made her knees weak. Behind him, a crimson Ferrari idled at the curb, its engine a low growl cutting through the soul night like a predator's purr. Amina, he said, and his voice was velvet dipped in danger, smooth enough to seduce, sharp enough to cut. You called for someone tonight. She couldn't move, couldn't speak. She had never seen this man in her entire life. Hours before, Halloween had painted Seoul in chaos and color. The streets had overflowed with laughter, couples in elaborate costumes, children clutching pillowcases full of candy. But none of it had reached Amina. She'd spent her evenings scrubbing down the small beauty parlor where she worked, the chemical sting of hair products burning her nostrils. Her colleagues had begged her to join them for drinks, but she'd smiled that tired smile and said no. Celebrations felt empty when your heart was still raw. In her cramped one-room flat, she'd collapsed onto her worn mattress, staring at the cracks spider-webbing across her ceiling. Seoul hummed outside her window, vibrant and indifferent. Her thoughts kept drifting back to Daniel, how he'd made her feel seen in this foreign city, how he'd whispered forever into her skin, how he'd walked away without a backward glance when the novelty wore off. She'd been his experiment. Another black woman for a rich Korean man to collect and discard when the fascination faded. But the ache hadn't faded. The hunger clawed at her insides until she couldn't breathe. She'd grabbed her phone, found his contact, and let the words pour out. I don't care about your excuses anymore. I don't care how badly you hurt me. I just need your arms around me one more time. I need you to love me the way I'm still stupid enough to love you. Her vision had blurred with tears. She kept typing, reckless, drowning. Tonight, I need you inside me until I forget my own heartbeat. Make love to me until this emptiness finally stops screaming. She'd hit send before courage could abandon her. Then she'd buried her face in her pillow and waited for the shame to devour her. Instead, she got a knock. Now she stood facing a stranger who looked at her like he could read every scar on her soul. His expression wasn't cruel. It wasn't amused. It was something else entirely, something that made her stomach flip dangerously. You didn't mean to send that to me, he said, and something almost like a smile touched his lips. Did you? Her mouth opened. Nothing came out. She shook her head slowly. I think there's been some kind of mistake, she whispered. Mistakes, he said deliberately, are often the most truthful things we ever do. Her pulse thundered in her skull. Who are you? Someone who received your words, he said simply. And someone who knows exactly what that kind of loneliness feels like. Amina glanced past him at the Ferrari, so violently out of place in front of her shabby building. Everything about this man was out of place in her small, invisible life. What do you want from me? She breathed. Nothing, he said. Then something shifted behind his eyes, something wounded. Your message reminded me of someone I lost. My mother. She used to write letters like that, begging for love from a man who only knew how to destroy her. When she died, I made myself a promise. No woman should ever feel that invisible. Not while I'm alive. Amina's throat closed. The silence between them felt heavy enough to crush her. He reached into his jacket and produced a key, extended it toward her. I don't know you, he said quietly. But I know this. A woman who writes those words deserves to be cherished. Take the car. Drive it wherever you want. Keep it. Consider it a gift for reminding me why I'm still human. She stared at the key like it might explode. I can't accept that. You already gave me something, he said, his voice dropping lower. You reminded me of that promise. That's worth more than any car. Her heart hammered against her ribs like it was trying to escape. She wanted to slam the door, wanted to scream, wanted to disappear. But another part of her, a part she didn't recognize and didn't trust, wanted to reach out, wanted to ask him to stay. Because something about this dangerous, impossible stranger made the loneliness feel smaller, and that terrified her more than anything else could. Kong Seo stood beside the Ferrari, cold wind biting through his clothes. Neon bled across the cracked street in waves of purple and gold. But his mind wasn't on Seoul. It was on the message still glowing on his phone screen. I'm breaking apart tonight. Please come. Touch me until I remember what it feels like to be wanted. Hold me until the sun rises, and I can pretend I'm not this lonely. The text had arrived without warning, cutting through his evening like a knife through silk. At first, he'd assumed it was a trap. Women didn't send him messages like that. When people contacted Kong Seo, it was for business, for protection, for fear. But this message was raw, unguarded, a woman bleeding her soul into the void and hoping someone would catch it. For a man like him, a man who lived in violence and shadows, it was disarming, almost fatal. He closed his eyes and thought of his mother. She used to write letters too, letters never meant to be sent, hidden in the back of her closet under silk scarves. Kong Seo had found them when he was 11, words begging for tenderness, begging to be rescued from a husband who saw her as decoration, nothing more. By the time she died, those letters were all that remained of her hope. Now, reading this stranger's message, Kong Seo felt something stir inside him that he thought was dead. A need to protect someone fragile before the world broke them the way it had broken his mother. Inside the apartment, Amina sat on the edge of her bed, hands trembling. She couldn't stop thinking about him. The tattoos, the suit, the way his eyes had looked at her like he knew every truth she'd ever hidden. Why did he come here? She whispered to the empty room. How did I even send it to him? She picked up her phone, staring at the contact. The number was so close to Daniel's, just one digit off. Her stomach dropped. One tiny error had brought a stranger to her door. Not just any stranger. A dangerous man. Every instinct screamed at her to block him. Delete everything. Pretend this nightmare never happened. But her hands wouldn't move. Because beneath the fear, there was something else. Hunger. Kong Seo didn't leave. He wasn't the type to walk away once something caught his attention. Instead, he sat in his car, scrolling back through the message, reading each line again as if trying to decode the woman behind the desperation. I just need your arms around me one more time. I need you to love me the way I'm still stupid enough to love you. He exhaled slowly, fingers tightening on the steering wheel. Why did it matter? He didn't know her. He wasn't supposed to care. Yet every sentence echoed inside him, pulling at something that had been silent for years. His phone buzzed. A text from one of his men. Boss, we're ready. The shipment's waiting. Kong Seo ignored it. For once, business could wait. Instead, he typed out a message, his fingers hesitating over the screen. He was used to giving commands, issuing threats, controlling rooms. Not this. Finally, he sent it. You don't seem like someone who should be alone tonight. The buzz of her phone made Amina jump. She reached for it, expecting Daniel, or maybe a sick joke. But when she read the words, her breath stopped. She stared at the message. Should she reply? Every instinct told her this was madness. She didn't even know his name. And yet, she couldn't stop herself. I didn't mean to send that to you. It was a mistake. His reply came almost instantly. Maybe. But mistakes can reveal the truths we're too afraid to speak. Her hands trembled. She typed, erased, typed again. Finally, she sent, "You don't know me. You don't know what I've been through." His reply came seconds later. "Then tell me." "I'm listening." That night, their conversations stretched longer than she ever intended. At first, she kept her words short, careful. But slowly, without realizing it, Amina began to share pieces of herself. Her life as a hairstylist in Seoul, how she'd come here with dreams of building something beautiful only to find herself trapped in exhaustion and isolation, how love had been nothing but disappointment, men who used her, fetishized her, and left her with nothing but scars. He didn't interrupt, didn't flirt. He just listened. When she finally asked, "Why do you even care?" his answer was quiet but weighted. "Because once I watched a woman I loved cry herself to sleep every night. And no one listened to her. Not even me. I won't make that mistake again." Her throat tightened. Whoever this man was, there was pain in him too. She wanted to ask who he really was. But before she could, another knock sounded at her door. This time softer, more patient. Her breath caught. She looked through the peephole, and there he was again, Kang Seo. But now in his hand, he wasn't holding car keys. He was holding something else. A single blood-red rose. When she finally opened the door, his gaze met hers, steady and unreadable. "You told me you needed someone to hold you tonight," he said quietly. "I don't know if I can be that person, but I can sit here, outside your door, so you don't feel so alone." Amina's chest ached. No man had ever said something like that to her. Not in Seoul. Not anywhere. And as she closed her door softly, sliding down to the floor with tears streaming down her face, she realized one thing. Whoever this stranger was, he wasn't just dangerous. He was the most dangerous kind of man. The kind who could tear down every wall she'd built to protect herself. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she wanted to stop him. Amina couldn't stop staring at the sleek Ferrari parked outside her building. The engine's roar still echoed in her ears, impossibly loud in the quiet street. Her hands shook as she held the key he'd left, smooth, cold, impossibly heavy in her palm. She pressed the button, and the car's lights blinked in response. Her breath hitched. "How did this happen?" she whispered. One wrong number had led to this. A man she didn't know, dangerous and magnetic, now knew her address, knew her loneliness, and cared enough to show up. Minutes earlier, she'd been curled up on her bed, trying to make sense of it all. Her phone still buzzed with short messages from Kang Seo. "You don't have to talk to me if you don't want to. But I'll be here. I'll watch over you." Her heart pounded in ways she couldn't name. Fear, curiosity, and something else, something that had nothing to do with safety. Kang Seo stood a few meters away, leaning against a lamppost. Tattoos peeked from under his suit sleeves, the night wind ruffling his dark hair. His eyes followed her through the window, not threatening, but in a way that made her chest tighten. She wanted to call the police, lock the door, tell him to leave. But every instinct that had kept her safe before felt useless now. When she finally stepped outside, careful and trembling, he straightened. His voice was calm, steady, even with that underlying edge she couldn't ignore. "Amina," he said simply, not a question, a statement. "I hope I didn't frighten you." "You didn't." "I'm just," she paused, trying to breathe, confused. He smiled faintly, a dangerous curve of lips that somehow felt protective. "Good. Confusion is the beginning of understanding. And tonight, you need understanding." Her chest fluttered. "I don't know who you are." His eyes softened for a moment, almost regretful. "Soon you'll know me better than anyone ever has." Over the next few days, Kang Seo began to appear in subtle ways. Not intrusive, not overwhelming, but impossible to ignore. A coffee outside her salon, left anonymously on her station with a note. "For your long days. KS." A bouquet of blood-red roses at her doorstep. No words, just a presence she couldn't explain. Amina's curiosity burned alongside her fear. She couldn't deny the strange thrill that ran through her whenever she spotted him from her window. And yet the thought of who he really was, a man she didn't know, a man with shadows she couldn't see, terrified her. One evening, he appeared as she locked up the salon, leaning casually against his Ferrari, watching her with those unreadable eyes. "You work too hard," he said quietly. "You deserve more than this life of constant exhaustion." She blinked. "Who are you really?" "Someone who knows what it's like to be trapped in a world that doesn't care about you." Her stomach twisted. The pain in his voice echoed her own loneliness, yet it carried a weight she didn't understand. She wanted to ask more, but words failed her. He didn't push. He just handed her another blood-red rose and left, the engine of his Ferrari fading into the night. Later, sitting on her bed, Amina held the flower, inhaling its delicate scent. Her mind raced. Every encounter with him pulled at something inside her. Fear, longing, curiosity, something dangerously like attraction. She thought of the wrong number, the text, the confession she'd sent that led to this. How had one small mistake brought a man like this into her life? And more importantly, why did it feel like he belonged there? By the weekend, she began noticing whispers on the street. Shopkeepers, neighbors, strangers passing by, glancing at the Ferrari and talking in hushed tones. Kong Sio's presence was not unnoticed. Fear and curiosity mingled in her chest. She wanted to run. She wanted to hide. But every time she tried to push the thought of him away, she found herself thinking of his voice, his eyes, the strange calm he radiated even when danger seemed close. For the first time in months, she wondered if loneliness could be something more, something that drew her toward him even if danger lurked beneath. And in that quiet, uneasy tension, Amina realized something terrifying and thrilling at once. She wanted to see him again. The morning sunlight fell softly across Amina's apartment, catching the petals of the blood-red rose Kong Sio had left on her bedside table the night before. She stared at it, fingers tracing the delicate edges, heart pounding uncontrollably. It had been days since that first knock, days since he'd appeared outside her salon, leaning against his Ferrari with those unreadable eyes. And yet the memory of him, dangerous, handsome, commanding, haunted her in the quiet moments. Her phone buzzed suddenly, making her jump. A message from him. "Meet me at 8 tonight. I want to show you something." The words were simple, direct, terrifying. Her first instinct was to ignore it. Her second was to delete it. But her thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. Curiosity, desire, and a strange sense of destiny battled within her. Finally, she typed, "Where?" "Seoul Tower. Be there." The hours crawled. Amina tried to busy herself at the salon, but her hands shook as she worked on hair and makeup. Every knock on the door, every sound outside made her heart leap. What kind of man was this? Why was he doing this for her? By 7:30, she was dressed and ready. She'd chosen a simple burgundy dress that hugged her curves in all the right places, her natural hair styled in perfect coils framing her face. She tried to look composed, but inside, her heart raced with nervous anticipation. Seoul Tower loomed in the distance as she arrived. The city lights glittered like diamonds scattered across velvet. And there, leaning against a sleek black car at the base of the tower, was Kong Sio. Tattoos visible beneath the rolled-up sleeves of his crisp black shirt, tailored pants, polished shoes. Every inch of him screamed power and danger. Yet there was a softness in his eyes when they met hers. "You came," he said simply. Amina swallowed hard. "I didn't know what to expect." "Expect nothing," he replied, his lips curling in that faint smile that made her pulse race. "Tonight, you'll see only what I want you to see." They rode the elevator up to the observation deck. The city sprawled beneath them, alive and glittering. He stood close, but not too close, just near enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Why are you doing all this?" she asked, trying to sound casual, but her voice betrayed her curiosity. He remained silent for a moment, eyes fixed on the skyline. "Because you deserve to be seen," he said finally. "You write words like someone who's been invisible too long. I can't allow that." Amina felt her chest tighten. No man had ever spoken to her like that. No man had ever made her feel simultaneously so small and so noticed. He handed her a small box. Confused, she opened it to find a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny moon. "For you," he said simply. "A reminder that even in darkness, you still glow." Her hands shook as she fastened it around her wrist. "Why are you so kind?" she whispered. "Because kindness is a luxury most people can't afford," he said, eyes glinting. "And I can." For a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy and intimate. She wanted to speak, to ask questions about who he really was. But fear tangled with desire, leaving her tongue tied. Then, unexpectedly, he took her hand. Not a harsh grip, not a claim, but a careful, gentle hold that made her pulse spike. "You're not afraid?" she asked, voice barely audible. "Afraid of what?" he countered, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "Of you," she admitted softly. Kong Sio's smile was almost imperceptible, but it reached his eyes. "Good," he said. "You should be." They walked to the edge of the deck, the wind whipping through her coils, the city lights reflecting in her eyes. She could feel the tension coiling around him, the danger that radiated from every line of his body, and yet the warmth of his hand anchored her. "You shouldn't trust me," he said quietly. "I'm not the kind of man anyone should fall for." Amina's heart stuttered. "Then why am I not scared?" "Because you know something I don't tell anyone," he murmured. "You see through the masks, and you make me want to be better than the man the world thinks I am." Her breath caught. His words struck her like lightning, leaving her dizzy and disoriented. This dangerous, untouchable man was vulnerable before her. As the night deepened, they spoke. Not about business, not about the world outside, but about life, loss, loneliness. Kong Seo told her fragments of his past, carefully, selectively, about his mother, about the pain of growing up under a father who had no love to give, about the emptiness he'd learned to carry like armor. Amina shared pieces of her own life, the heartbreaks, the loneliness in a foreign city, the men who'd used her for curiosity or sport. And as they talked, the distance between them shrank. When the city clock struck 11, Kong Seo finally broke the silence. "I want to take you somewhere else. A quiet place where no one can judge you, where you can be yourself." Her pulse raced. "And if I refuse?" He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "Then I'll wait. But I hope you won't." By the end of the night, Amina realized she'd forgotten everything else. The loneliness, the heartbreak, the pain that had haunted her for months. In its place, there was this strange, terrifying, exhilarating feeling. She was falling for a man she barely knew, a man who could destroy her with a whisper, yet had chosen instead to show her kindness, attention, and something else, something dangerous and yet intoxicating. The drive home was quiet. Kong Seo didn't speak much, letting her thoughts roam, letting the city lights blur past them. And when he dropped her off, he didn't kiss her, didn't even linger, but his hand brushed hers for a fleeting second, sending shivers down her spine. "Good night, Amina," he said finally. "Good night," she whispered, barely breathing. After he left, she sat on her bed, staring at the silver bracelet on her wrist. Her heart still raced, her mind still whirled, and deep down, she knew something undeniable had begun tonight. A connection forged in loneliness, curiosity, and an inexplicable pull toward a man who was dangerous and unforgettable. And somehow, she didn't want it to end. Amina hadn't slept all night. The memory of Kong Seo's hand brushing hers in the Ferrari, the weight of his gaze, the way his voice had spoken to her as if reading her soul, it replayed endlessly in her mind. Her small apartment felt suffocating now, too quiet, too empty. For the first time in months, she felt alive and terrified at the same time. Her phone buzzed softly. A message from Kong Seo. "Meet me at the Han River Pier at 8. Don't be late." She hesitated. Fear warred with curiosity. She didn't know what awaited her, what kind of man truly existed behind the cold, charming mask. And yet, something inside her, a spark she hadn't felt in years, pushed her forward. By 8 o'clock, Amina stood at the pier, the city lights reflecting on the river like liquid gold. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of the river mixed with the distant aroma of street food. And there he was, waiting as always, leaning casually against a sleek black car that gleamed under the lamplight. On time, he said simply, his eyes scanning her face, as if noting every detail. She swallowed hard. I didn't know what this is, she admitted, her voice trembling slightly. Kong Seo stepped closer. Not too close, just enough to make her pulse race. Neither do I, he said, voice low, almost a growl. But I want you to see something that matters to me. Curiosity surged, overriding her fear. What is it? He smiled faintly and opened the car door for her. The interior smelled of leather and cologne. Trust me, he said. They drove through the city, lights blurring past the windows. Finally, they arrived at a massive private estate hidden behind high walls and guards. Amina's heart stuttered. This is, she began, but words failed her. This is where I live, he said simply. I don't usually bring people here. But you deserve to see me fully, not just glimpses. The estate was lavish, understated yet intimidating. Marble floors, modern furniture, subtle artwork, and the faint hum of security cameras. A world she could never have imagined. Amina's pulse raced. The danger she'd felt outside her apartment seemed magnified tenfold here, but mingled with it was an undeniable thrill. Kong Seo guided her to a balcony overlooking a private courtyard. The moonlight spilled across the space, casting long shadows. He leaned against the railing, watching her with those inscrutable eyes. You're scared, he said quietly, almost as if reading her mind. I shouldn't be here, she admitted softly. I don't belong in this world. He smiled, a slow, teasing curl of lips that made her chest tighten. No one belongs in my world, he said. But tonight, I want you to belong somewhere, here with me, even if just for a moment. Her throat went dry. She wanted to speak, to ask the questions that screamed in her mind. Who is he really? How did he find me? Why me? But the words caught in her chest. Instead, she nodded. Dinner was served in a private room, soft candlelight flickering against walls lined with books and artwork. The food was exquisite, flavors delicate yet bold. Amina ate slowly, tasting each bite as if savoring a dream. You eat too fast sometimes, Kong Seo remarked casually, eyes watching her. I'm nervous, she admitted. Everything about this, about you, is so overwhelming. He chuckled softly, a rare, low sound that seemed almost gentle. Good, he said. I want a night to overwhelm you in a good way. She felt her face heat, and for a moment, she imagined what that could mean. Not just the food, the estate, or the city view, but him, the dangerous pull he carried. After dinner, Kong Seo led her to a small library. The room smelled faintly of old leather and cedarwood. He gestured to a chair by the fireplace. Sit, he said. She did, heart racing. He perched on the edge of the table opposite her, leaning forward. The firelight flickered across his face, highlighting the sharp lines of his jaw, the tattoos curling up his neck, the dark depth of his eyes. I've never met anyone like you, he said quietly. You're fearless even in your fear, honest even in your pain, and despite everything, you still reach for connection. That's rare. Her chest tightened. I don't know what to say. Say nothing, he replied. Just listen. For hours, they talked about life, about loneliness, about love and loss. Kong Seo shared glimpses of the man he'd become, the walls he'd built around himself, the people he'd lost, the darkness he'd embraced. And Amina, in turn, shared the heartbreaks she'd endured in Seoul, the men who'd used her, and the emptiness she'd carried since arriving. Every word drew them closer. Every glance tightened the invisible thread binding them. She felt safe and terrified all at once, caught between fascination and fear. Finally, Kong Seo rose and approached her, slow, deliberate. He extended a hand. Dance with me, he said quietly. I don't know how, she whispered. I'll guide you, he said simply, and took her hands in his. The first notes of soft jazz began to play from a small speaker, filling the room. And as they moved together, hesitant at first, then gradually more fluidly, Amina felt something she hadn't felt in years. Warmth, safety, and belonging. He didn't try to kiss her. He didn't try to claim her. He simply held her, guiding her in the dance, letting her lean against him, letting her feel wanted without pressure. When the music ended, he stepped back slightly, still holding her gaze. "You're extraordinary," he said softly, "and I want to know every part of you. But I won't rush, not now, not ever."
Her throat went dry.
She nodded, overwhelmed by the intensity of his words, the weight of his presence. She wanted to speak, to tell him how she felt, but fear and awe kept her silent. "Tonight," he said quietly, "is only the beginning. Remember that." And with that, he led her back to the car, silent but close, his hand brushing hers in a fleeting, electric touch. Back in her apartment later, Amina lay awake, the silver moonlight spilling across her bed. Her thoughts spun endlessly about the estate, the firelit library, the dance, and the pull of a man who is dangerous yet tender, commanding yet careful. She traced the outline of the bracelet he'd given her, the tiny moon catching the light. And deep down, she knew one terrifying, thrilling truth. She was falling for a man who could destroy her life in an instant. And she didn't care, because for the first time in a long time, she felt alive. Hello, beauties. And just like that, Amina's lonely night turned into a shock she never saw coming. A Ferrari, a mysterious man, and a life she never imagined. But is this the start of true love or something far more dangerous? Find out in episode 2. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and share.